media. And as we've seen over the last 20 years, they've been enabling new entertainment experiences that take place on any location, any device. But what the impact that has on where we go from here is, as I observe the tension between humans' interest and desire to connect with one another and to use media to do that, and also the desire to isolate and to escape reality. So as we look at this continual tension and where we are today, what does that say about the future of where media and technology are going? In many ways, we're already living in the future. In the last 20 years, we've seen amazing technological change in how we access content. And with that, we've seen the growth in content and formats that isolate. Mobile phones, podcasts, music streaming, and binge watching content. And my personal favorite, which is the headphone usage everywhere. I live in London, and when I ride the tube, I think it's sort of amusing to see everyone in their headphones sort of traveling around like zombies in a different reality yet altogether. But not all of the content that we're seeing out there is isolating. Let's see if we get this change. Huge continuing growth and interest in sports and a way to connect with one another. Similarly with live events. And as there's much discussion going on right now today at IBC around esports and that growing phenomenon of playing games but also connecting in a community around it. I've been a student of technology and media my whole life. I'm a Silicon Valley native, and I was born the year that Atari and Apple II were released. I spent my high school and college years interning at software startups in the Valley. And I remember when I got my first AOL email account and the joy of connecting with my friends and surfing the web with AOL. And even though I've traveled the world, I haven't lost those roots. I currently work as the CEO of Jaunt XR, and I'm on the board of directors for Harmonic and for Entertainment One. And this purview allows me to see the massive changes in consumer habits in entertainment and what we're seeing. So let's take a look back quickly. What have been the two main factors over the last 20 years that have affected how we enjoy content? Well, first and foremost, whenever you talk about entertainment experiences, the first requirement is entertaining. You've got to have content that people like, and that's table stakes. And I know to all the creative people out there, it's easier said than done. But what we've really seen in the last 20 years as well is the growth of accessibility. It started with the streaming of TV shows to computers. And I was part of helping to make that happen with the launch of Hulu. I was part of the team that formed and launched that 12 years ago. But what we've seen since there is a massive growth, accessibility now on every device, on TVs and tablets and mobile phones. And a lot of people at the time questioned if it would work. Would people really watch on a small screen? And they do, and they keep doing more and more of it. And it's continuing to grow. We have, right now today, over 200 OTT channels globally. It's a $30 billion global industry expected to double over the next 5 years. And this year alone, we're seeing major new launches coming up from the major media players that's going to continue to evolve the landscape. So now that we've seen how accessible this content is, what does it say? Are we isolated or being brought together? The overwhelming answer is it really does isolate us. Nielsen Total Audience Report in the US found that adults spend 11 hours consuming media, and 6 hours of that are alone. In Britain, most members of the household, only 30%, if they're watching in the same room, are watching the same thing. They're usually on separate devices and isolating experiences. But as well as what we're seeing is teenage isolation. The number of teens who get together with their friends on a daily basis has decreased by more than 40% from 2000 to 2015. And teens who spend more time than average on screen activities are more likely to be unhappy. So how do we battle this isolation? And where do we go from here? Can media and technology in the future help to connect us? I think it can, and I think we can look at a framework for how to look at new product offerings to enable this. So as I talked about at the beginning, yesterday and today, we've been focused on entertaining content and making it accessible. Of course, that's going to continue, but there's a few more factors to consider. And I've put together a framework that I look at when I'm looking at new offerings in the space. It's called PACE: personalized, accessible, connection, and entertaining. So what does that mean? Personalized. We're going to be looking for media and technology solutions that are personalized to each individual, helping you find content that you'll find interesting and that you'll want to share and enjoy. The factor with accessibility is not going away. We continue to see that. It's a lot of what we've seen at IBC. I've certainly seen this in working with Harmonic and their VOS services that enable the launch of an OTT channel in just a few days. But the accessibility across devices across the world is going to continue, and that push will happen. Connection. That desire to connect with others and to use media and technology to do that. I think when we look at new products and technology, connection's a key part of that. And it can be to two different things. It can be connecting with another person in a way that allows you to share the experience, or connecting to large IP and bringing it to life. The expansion of seeing brands and IP and characters that you like and experiencing them live is quite important. And interestingly, on connection, even just sharing a media experience can be helpful. Research has shown that couples who watch a romantic movies together and talk about them after are as likely to stay together as those who go to couples counseling. So it's just the connection is helpful. And finally, last but not least, entertaining. It still has to be great content. That's still an important piece. And we've, we continue to see that content is what drives a lot of usage of OTT channels. It's 57% of people subscribe to OTT services for exclusive content, and for millennials, it's even higher, above 70%. So let's look at this framework and apply it to a couple things that we've seen in the market and see how it applies. One interesting new technology and media service that's out there is Peloton. It's the ultimate personalized experience. You're creating your own account, you're creating your own workout plan, and you're working out at home alone on a bike. And yet, it breaks through because it has a connection. It creates a community of users in a class. People log on at a certain time to take a class and compete with others. And it's creating a new model of the VHS exercise tapes of years ago. And they also provide the connectivity. They now have an app that enables you to work out from anywhere, even when you're away from your actual equipment. And of course, they have great instructors, so it's entertaining content. Nintendo Switch is another one that's been a really breakthrough hit. And I think they really nailed the next generation of accessibility. You have the Switch that lets you take it anywhere. You can play with your friends on the small screen. But when you're near the big screen, you can connect it there and switch it to that. And that type of new accessible experience creates that connection that users are looking for, but also in a unique way. And what are a couple examples of technology that's been rolled out and hasn't cracked this? I would say the first generation of the VR headsets. I work in the immersive industry, and I still think there's a lot of potential in immersive. But ultimately, one of the challenges in the first generation is that it was highly isolating, and it was difficult to navigate. It wasn't a personalized experience. So I think we'll continue to see VR expand as we address those concerns. And I won't name names, but there's a lot of generic OTT or video services out there that haven't succeeded or have had to pivot because they've done the basics of just providing content that they might have and making it accessible. And really the market's moved. Consumers expect that exclusive content, or they expect product features or use cases that are different. And I think especially as we start to see more of these services coming out, it's going to have everyone in the OTT space up their game. So where do we go from here? And applying this PACE framework to all the trends we've been seeing, what are the things I think are going to be happening here in the near term? I think immersive experiences that allow you to connect with others are going to break out. Certainly the glass experiences have worked in enterprise, but increasingly so, I think they will consumer. Or also AR experiences enable you to have a shared immersive experience through your mobile phone. Live events and large IP are going to continue to grow. We'll see those franchises grow not only in content that create, but also in the real life experiences that let you connect with them. Targeted advertising. Now that we're seeing people accessing content on so many different devices and in so many different locations, how can we take advantage of the device that they're on and the location that they're at to serve the right advertising? In the industry and large in advertising, there's a lot of talk about location-based advertising. But how's that going to start fitting in with where we serve media? And is that an opportunity to be unlocked? I think it is. As well, we're going to see bundling. We already see a little bit of this. Both Hulu and Amazon allow you to add on other OTT services to your billing cycle. Spotify just acquired Podcast Network. This bundling is going to enable as well the better ability to personalize. And you're not going to be no longer looking for personalization through one media format, but also across media formats. And finally, discovery. Nearly half of people are frustrated by the growing by the difficulty in finding content. There's still the feeling of there's nothing on TV. So how do we help people discover the content and the services that's going to work for them? I think as an industry, we can take a look at the desire for human connection and look at this framework as we look forward to where consumers are going and how we can create experiences and technology and content that meets those needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitzi. If you'd like to take a seat, do you have any questions? If you do, you can put them to us via the IBC app, interacting with sessions, or alternatively, you can put your question via Slido, which is sli.do. That starts with a www. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that. And really what we're looking at here is technology. Does it isolate or does it connect? Or more importantly, it has been proven thus far to isolate. How do we now move on and make it start to connect people? So if I can take a seat next to you. Let me ask you first of all, is it the job of technology to connect people? Isn't the alternative just to put it down and walk outside?
It's not the job of technology, but I think that people like technology. And I think as an industry, we see right now a lot of tension of, oh, you can just put it down. But technology is going to become more and more part of our lives. And so how do we embed it in a way that we can still allow that connection and it becomes an enhancer potentially of that and doesn't have to take away from it?
I can hardly refute what you say. Over the past, through the digital age, technology has taken over more and more of our lives, but we still only have so many hours in a day. And whilst you may say that the entertainment side of it has become more isolating in so much as families aren't watching television together, people are watching things on their own devices, which works on the one hand because you actually still do have human contact at that point, even if you are taking in the information or the entertainment that you choose. So where do you see the entertainment side of things going?
Well, I think the entertainment side, it's still going to be great storytelling. We continue to see the formats of traditional linear television type of shows in terms of that format. We see film continuing to be something that consumers watch. I think what's also been interesting is the rise of miniseries. So now with not being stuck with a traditional TV schedule, you can look at different lengths of episodes or a series. And then the growth in short form content. We have Quibi coming out, which is mobile centric. Certainly Snapchat is doing a lot in this space. So I think that the content creators are going to be continuing to look at the formats that help to meet the needs based on the use case for the device.
You spoke briefly about the number of channels available, specifically about the ones you pay for. But I did happen to notice, staying in a hotel here in Amsterdam, that when I switched on the television in the room, I had Homes Under the Hammer in Dutch. And you're thinking, well, is the content actually out there? Because somebody's having to fill the schedules, somebody's having to fill the quotas, whether it's Netflix, whether it's Amazon, whether it's some of the others you mentioned. The desire, the thirst for content is huge, and it's only going to get greater. You spoke about the mini-series and the fact that we're no longer tied to schedules. Until fairly recently, if we're watching something on television, we have to wait until next week. And now it pops up on Netflix and you can just go bang, 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 episode after episode. And that increases the likelihood of binge watching. So who's going to go out and make these things?
Who's going to go out and make the content? I think that we're seeing this as the biggest time. It's the golden age of television. More content's being produced now than any period of time in the past, and I think that's going to continue. And you see that happening both in traditional Hollywood, but also in local markets. And everyone's becoming a creator. YouTube has enabled that, and I think that trend will continue.
But where does the money come from for those quality programs?
It'll be from the leads, from the OTT channel leads who are already out there, the major media companies, and I think we continue to see the tech companies playing in this. Obviously, Apple's been a big player. YouTube does it, but on a different end of the spectrum, as well as there's been questions about how much Facebook will be involved.
I know that certainly throughout this conference there has been a lot of talk about sport and how technology is going to change the way we watch sport. What are your feelings about that?
I think sport's a really exciting type of IP because it brings together so many great elements. It's live, people care about the players, so they sort of are attached to the individuals, but they're also more broadly associated with the team of the larger IP, so it has real staying power. So I think that sports is going to continue to be quite strong and continue to be global, or grow to be even more global. As we can break down how sports rights are secured globally, it'll allow fans around the world who are not necessarily in the market to appreciate the content and enjoy it. Historically, if you've been a fan and not in the market, it's very hard to watch the content live. Maybe you might be able to get it if it's a big game on an obscure channel, but the live options just weren't as good as they are now. And so I think we'll continue to see a more globalization and a global fan base for that piece, supported by OTT technology.
But how do you break the deadlock of certain channels buying up the rights at vast cost and other channels not being allowed to televise that game?
Well, I think in each given market, what you'll see is potentially the broadcasters continuing to buy the rights, but then also supplementing it with online experiences. And we see all the major traditional channels providing those types of additional add-on experiences. So I think that that's how consumers expect the content, and that will continue to be a trend. What I'm also saying is that beyond that local market where the team might play, you'll see bidders looking at it outside the market to buy it. So you reach now a broader audience through that.
Now, you yourself, you're very much involved in immersive media and the future of that. How do you see that changing the face of entertainment, sport, gaming, whatever it may be?
We have still a lot to learn about immersive entertainment and what works. Certainly, gaming has worked a fair amount. There's a lot of utility-based use cases for immersive content, but there's still a lot to do. And I think that's, to be frank, that's where the creative minds come in. And they can look at, is it complementary experiences to linear storytelling? Is it its own storytelling experience? Is it location-based storytelling experiences? There's a lot of different interesting storytelling trials happening and ways that people are working with these mediums. And I think we're still figuring out exactly what's going to click and what's going to resonate with consumers.
One of the constant issues that seems to come up is that of the headset. Can you see a solution for that? Are you working on a solution for that?
Yeah, I think the headset is very isolating, which there's situations in which you may want to be isolated. For example, at Jaunt, we license some content to services that provide remedial care in hospitals, and people want to be taken somewhere else. They want to be somewhere that they're not. But that's one use case. I think what's really going to break it out is allowing people to connect with others in that experience. What we focus on at Jaunt is the creation of humans in like basically photorealistic avatars of yourself that you can use in headset or in AR experiences through your mobile phone. So we're not looking to crack the whole piece of the storytelling, but to provide some technology that enable a person to be represented in that experience.
So this volumetric capture, would you
Yes.
call it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Volumetric capture. How popular is it proving to be?
Quite popular. We've been at it, focused on it for the last year, have a number of clients who have utilized it. And what we find, and a good way to think about it, is it's a bit like a 3D selfie. All of a sudden you get a sort of 3D version of yourself moving around, and you can put yourself, little tiny on the table like this or giant behind you. And consumers love it. We've done a couple of pieces of work with Snapchat, and their audience base has found it to be really fun. We've also found it's been effective in enterprise use cases. So we've had a few enterprise clients who are looking to do trainings in VR, and they want to have their senior leaders in the VR experience and being a 3D person. And this enables them to easily capture it to create that experience.
Presumably not to have them dancing on the desk.
Probably not dancing on the desk, yeah.
I can understand how Snapchat and such apps might relish the idea of that. Can you see a large section of a work-based environment where it would work?
Well, I think on the media spectrum, the other piece that it could work and is an area of focus for us is around talent and athletes. So our solution in particular is a portable solution that you can take anywhere on location. So you can imagine athletes on the field, being able to see them and actually see them, do their golf swing. You could imagine taking this to a red carpet and being able to see talent and their outfits in full 3D from every angle, and being able to spin that on your phone and zoom in and really see what they're wearing. So I think there's a lot of natural complements in the media space.
Seen quite a lot of this at the conference this year, the ability to change your angle of viewing and thereby changing your depth of field and what you're actually seeing on the television. Obviously, technology will continue to go forwards, but is that something the public actually want?
Well, I think going back to the framework I put forward is I think if it connects to those other pieces, does it help bring people another connection? Is it an accessible solution that they want? Is it add personalization? I think just innovation for the sake of innovation might pop out, but there's a lot of other factors happening that you have to think through as you look at any particular new functionality to think about what's the value to the consumer and the user ultimately.
Whilst you're looking at immersive entertainment, obviously technology is also being used in the workplace, and in similar fashion, it's isolating people. You've got webinars rather than going to a meeting. You've got video calls rather than having a face-to-face meeting. You're using email rather than picking up the telephone maybe. And all of flexible working from home, all these things are seeking to isolate. Do you think that the world in general is taking this issue of isolation seriously enough?
I think the world, yes, I think there's a lot of people talking about it. I know in talking to a lot of parents focused on how you think about that and how you help yourself and your family develop good habits. I work remotely a fair amount, and I use a lot of video chat, and I love it. I so much prefer it to doing phone calls, because then I actually feel connected to people. And just last week, I met in person somebody I'd been talking on the phone to for a year and a half, and felt like I had known him, for the year and a half, because I'd never seen him in person. So there's certainly more we can do, but what I'm encouraged by is the fact that people are talking about it, and then people are thinking about how do we make these limits, and trying a lot of different ways to find that right balance. Ultimately, as I said, I'm a Silicon Valley native. I love technology. I love learning new stuff. I think it's unlocked so many great potentials in our world and made our lives so interesting. But at the same time, nothing is not without its downsides. So I think the fact that there is so much dialogue about it will help us to move in the right direction.
Do you think that country by country attitudes change in terms of trust in technology? Certainly heard one of the tech talks yesterday where a psychologist was saying that people actually don't like giving away things like fingerprints. They don't like the biometrics because they feel that they are losing control of themselves. They start to worry when personalized ads come up, and yet you're talking about more direct personalization.
Yeah, I think it's where people draw the lines is very interesting. I live in London and have lived there for 3.5 years, but I'm American and have lived in different areas of the U.S. So it's interesting. In general, in Europe, I would say there's a more concern about privacy, and certainly with GDPR coming out, there's a lot more regulation around it. Yet at the same time, when you go through the e-gates in the UK, they use facial recognition technology, where they don't do that in the US, where on the flip side, you would say there may be more lax about privacy, but there they still have a human checking your picture, even when you're using the global entry. So it's interesting to see where different cultures draw the line. And I think interesting to see how that continues to evolve. And ultimately, it's going to be up to consumers to say what they're willing to accept and what they're going to look for as they think about these different technologies and how much they want to allow and what they'll embrace.
This particular tech talk yesterday was to do with smart speakers judging your mood, your attitude, and therefore offering you entertainment appropriate. What did come out in that was the fact that if you're in a bad mood, you don't necessarily want to change. You want to stay in that bad mood. And so offering you anything is pretty pointless. I think they've actually whittled the technology now down to something in the remote control, which picks up who's got the remote control and how they feel. But the whole issue of the smart speakers or Facebook or people knowing what you're doing, knowing what you bought recently, is actually quite disturbing. How much further do you think personalization can go before people start going, do you know, enough?
I think those areas still have a lot of work to do. I think understanding how your mood affects what you're going to want to listen to is quite challenging. I think we can do a lot more in just the more basics. I think when I think about personalization, for example, Spotify creates a playlist for me based on what other music I've listened to. And it's really useful because sometimes I want to discover content and I don't listen to the radio anymore. And so that's a great way to discover content. It doesn't have to deal with anything related to my mood or what I've said, but just based on my habits. I also do think that there's opportunity, as I mentioned, across types of media. So if you know that you're listening to a certain type of podcast, can it help you find other types of content that you might like or refer you, in other directions? So I think about it more as cracking some of the what I would call like more immediate terms basics that would unlock personalization. Another one is what my friends are watching. I mean, it's a topic of conversation frequently of what shows you're watching, what are you liking, what else should I watch? And no one has yet cracked how do you share that amongst friends when you want to in a social way. I think the anticipating your feelings, those sort of things, in my opinion, have more time to develop, need more time to develop.
Going back to that idea of technology isolating, an additional problem in many workplaces is that of hot desking, which means that you're never sitting in the same place in 2 days on the trot, and therefore not sitting next to a colleague who then becomes a friend. So your main drive in terms of technology connecting people rather than isolating them, you picked out Peloton. And Peloton perhaps works because it's a bike. It probably wouldn't work with basketball. So how many other sports can you think of where it would still be a success? And beyond sport, what other activities?
Well, I think there's different factors that make it work for Peloton, and I don't think that formula is going to work for every different type of exercise. But what I'm trying to pull out is the themes of what are we seeing that's working. It's the fact it's personalized. It's the fact it's connecting you. That's really broken it out in a new way. If I had all the answers of how this applied to all the media, I would I'd be making some big bets. But I think we have to continue to evolve it. But it's the framework that I use to think through. Where we're going to see these things evolve to.
Now, you mentioned in your talk, you think there'll be more focus and growth on live events. Why do you think that?
What we're seeing is with big IP, people like the opportunity of going somewhere and experiencing it together and then being able to share and talk about it later. And that piece of the entertainment space is continuing to grow. So what that means, I think, from a technology perspective is how do you perhaps make it more fun, more shareable, more unique, and let people live on with it past that one event.
What would, all right, if you pick more live events, of whatever type they may be, how are you driving that sharing experience?
Well, right now, I think it's more driven directly by consumers, whether it's sharing on social media or sharing it with friends, capturing videos. I think what we'll start to see is more immersive experiences happening there, more ways to potentially take content home with you that's better produced. IBC is a good example. They capture everything on video and post it online, so it lives on past that one event. You can't do that with all types of live events, but I think there'll be more of a drive to look at how you can do that so that it lives beyond that one event.
And when you talk about the fact that we should expect more bundling of different types of media, what brings you to that conclusion and what can we expect?
Yeah, I think it's interesting actually, because one of the big waves has been unbundling as we've moved to over-the-top services. But what you see is that bundling has some value in that it makes it easier from a billing perspective. It makes it easier to discover different types of content across channels or services. And so I think as we see more movement to OTT, which is inherently the ability to access it on every device, is that bundling has a path there. And it could be across video services or across other types of media, whether it's music or podcasts. And I think that will enable a sort of new way to bring media and package it together.
But where you get bundles, you also get prices driven down because people are looking for best value,
yes,
best content. And at that point, you've got less money, therefore, to put into the creation of new content?
Well, it depends, I think, on how the bundling ends up working. If the bundling lets you lower your customer acquisition cost, then perhaps it's actually a more profitable way to manage the business than doing it yourself. Ultimately, you might see multiple channels and paths that you use to acquire customers for those type of channels. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's less profitable.
Let me go back to your framework for new content offerings, which handily comes up as PACE. How did you come to those conclusions? Did you do a massive amount of research? Is it a personal feeling? What do you make of that?
As I was working in this industry for the last 20 years, looking at where we've come from, I used to joke there used to be sort of a TV everywhere slide, and every media company you talk to would show that slide that say, we're going to put our content everywhere. And that was the big theme for, the last 15 years. And it's largely happened, right? We've seen it. And now we're at a new frontier. So the framework is something I developed myself based on my own experiences. And I think the accessibility and great content and entertainment is quite important. But the personalization and connection, desire for people to connect with each other or IP is something that I also see as a big trend and is what's working.
Obviously, you're a CEO of Jaunt, and the future of immersive media is here. How do you feel that's going to alter the gaming industry? I speak as somebody who's got sons, and I don't know whether they're actually watching a football match or playing it most of the time. I have to look for the controller in their hand because the graphics now are quite superb. But you indicate that they're going to become more sophisticated still.
I think the graphics in the games today are amazing, and they are very realistic. And you do see such an interest in this because it is a way to socially connect around entertainment, which has been happening for a lot of years when you're playing against others. But now with the rise of esports, it becomes even in itself its own live event and your own sort of teams and leagues to follow. We've seen in the immersive space in VR that actually games have done quite well. People like the ability to be in the game and that game experience. And I think as we see more socialization and the ability to connect with others in that, it will continue to grow. But the gaming industry itself, that's more the sort of traditional video games, but there's a whole field of mobile games as well. That's just a huge business as well. And I think that's quite ripe as well for more AR experiences that are driven off your mobile phone.
Again, back to your speech, you said, and I agreed, that technology isolates us as human beings. And I think most people would probably concur with that view. But is there hard evidence? And if there is, how bad is it?
There's definitely hard evidence that using more screen time makes you more isolated and more likely to be depressed. So I think the goal is to find the right balance and the ability to utilize the screen time that you have in a way that's helpful. Especially social media is harder. So you see it in teenagers. Interestingly, for girls, using social media is more harmful to their self-confidence versus boys who are typically more using gaming and connecting. It's less harmful. Because it's more about collaboration and playing together and competition, whereas girls, it can be more about your appearance and feeling left out and this sort of you're not part of a social group. So I think also looking at not sort of lumping all screen time together, but how are you using, what are you doing with those activities? I have this debate with my children all the time because I'm always asking them not, to limit their screen time. And they're like, but you're always on your computer. And I'm like, well, I'm working or I'm on a video chat with my team. And so you really I think we have to get more sophisticated and nuanced about what is the activity and how does that affect people differently?
Something like Facebook or Snapchat, obviously a huge success. And yet transient. Remember, we started with Friends Reunited. A couple of my children have dropped Facebook, but they do use Snapchat and they do use Instagram. Why do these things come in and out of fashion? And can you see there being a new one in the future?
I think it'd be hard to bet that there wouldn't be a new one. I mean, we've seen the background of MySpace and Friendster and all of these other social networks that have come through time. So I think it's likely there will be. I would bet on there would be. Do I know what it is? No, I don't. But I think the social platform of the time, I think, reflects in terms of what people are looking for and how they're looking to engage.
Well, thank you very much. I haven't got any questions here. Do we have any questions on the floor? From the floor?
IBC hosted the Broadcast Academy this year, training the next generation of broadcast professionals and specifically empowering women to get involved in sports production.
So I went along to see what happened. Key to any sports coverage is the event director, who typically also vision mixes the coverage. This IBC workshop was an opportunity for women aspiring directors to enjoy a masterclass.
Managers that we're in, so you can do 7, and then back to 2, 2, that's it. And then it's play again, 1. So you've got to be cool. Yeah.
The simulator plays the output of 11 cameras at a recent football match and offers the chance to use replays of any incident. It's a lot to take in at first attempt.
This is a very great opportunity to sit on the other side and understand what the problems are here.
The Broadcast Academy has been operating for more than 10 years, and we've realized that the sports audiences of lots of major events have changed now. More than 40% of the sports audiences worldwide are now women. But those voices are not reflected in sports production teams. And what we would like to do is encourage more women so they can become an equal partner in telling those stories. And that's one of the reasons why we're here today.
What's the most important trick to being a match director?
I think the most important thing is to sort of, how can I say, not overcut your pictures, and that applies even when you've got 40 of them. I mean, in most sports have got a geography to them and an expertise. So camera 1, your main wide shot on football, is still on screen when even if you've got 40 cameras, 80% of the time or more. So it's really a question of adding to that to make the viewer at home understand the action and enhance it rather than trying to dominate it with your cutting.
And the event acknowledged the best student on the day.
And the prize winner is Alexandra Fedina.
Looks great. Well, today is, of course, all about esports.
It is.
And we have a live feed. It's all going on in the auditorium at the moment, the IBC Esports Showcase.
Yes, indeed. And they're playing this live Counter-Strike game. Let's listen to the audio a bit, shall we?
Sound again. Massive, important.
So
part
that
of this
event
game.
ends at
And what he's
4
gonna hear in
o'clock.
front
Have we got audio
of him,
on
Very,
that?
very easy for him to get that kill. That should be
There
pretty
it
much
is.
the round on
So I think they're
track.
providing this, not only are we hearing some of the
Only
action from the
15
game
seconds left on the
itself,
clock.
you know,
It
the
takes
machine gun
3.5
fire, whatever, but there are a team of commentators already watching the game. 5 players on each team, Germany taking on Portugal.